Welcome to Gympie Landcare's podcast, where we have been caring for the land for over 33 years. Our group was founded by local graziers who got together to share information and talk about how to improve the land. We have continued that tradition and firmly believe in the power of like-minded people working together to regenerate and rehabilitate the land. With these podcasts, we hope to inspire environmental change and regeneration through community engagement at all levels, from the backyard gardener to the farmer on large-scale properties. We will showcase real stories and passionate people, so come and visit us at our nursery or become a member or simply partner with us to create an abundant, healthy and self-sustaining biosphere in the Gympie region. Today we're talking to Maree Gillott on their beautiful farm here at Wolvi, and you'll see that behind us. Maree is the current president of Gympie Landcare. She's a wife, a mother, a lawyer, a farmer, a board member, and an all-round superwoman. Welcome, Maree, and thank you for the time to chat.
Oh, you're welcome.
Just to tell the audience, it's 30 degrees out here, so if you see the beads of perspiration coming down our brows, it's because it's really hot out here, but it's such a beautiful spot we decided to brave the weather.
Yes.
So Maree, let's kick off with, your childhood. Where were you born? Okay. What were your dreams?
Well, I had a fairly idyllic childhood, I guess. Oldest of 5 girls. Born in Brisbane, but lived in my early years on Tamborine Mountain on dairy farm, and later some small crops. So I guess that's where the farming gene kicked in. I recently worked out that I'm a 4th generation farmer, although I haven't personally been on the land all my life. So I had the sort of childhood that many of my generation have been lucky enough to have, which is, fairly free range. Didn't wear a pair of school shoes all day until probably high school because I'd, chuck them off at the front gate and put them in my bag and run all the way to school barefoot, and that was just how it was. So I had a nice, idyllic country kid childhood. I don't remember why I decided I'd like to be a lawyer. I thought I'd come up with it myself, but I'm told my dad suggested it when I was about 12, which was pretty new age back then for a old farmer to suggest such a thing. So I guess I've always had farming in my mind, even though I spent 30 plus years in the law instead.
Right. And how did you get here to Gympie?
Well, it was a long process, I have to say. When my husband and I, we were living at Logan for about 15 or so years on a decent piece of property down in Brisbane. It was 30 acres on the river, very nice, but development encroached, and then traffic lights and lots of people across the road, and pretty soon we realised it was time to go. So we hunted around, and it actually took us 2 years to find what we needed up here, because having done some rural pursuits during the last 30 years with others, our main criteria was water and water and water, because we just weren't doing the drought thing again. So we ended up here, which is a lovely area that's got decent rainfall and close enough to the grandkids and commuting back to Brisbane when we want to. So that it fit the bill.
And what other things were you looking for in a farm? I mean, water, was the soil something? What did you have in mind?
Well, look, we're a bit vague, actually. Can I just say? I mean, we'd done before with some friends, we'd done some share farming with cattle, sheep, silver perch, out in the Trap Rock country out near Leeburn. Had no visions of being small crop farmers, even though that's what I grew up as. In that family. I think we were thinking cattle, and we just were looking for a place where we could be busy, because neither of us are sort of slow down type people. So as we were moving into retirement, we weren't thinking about going to the bowls club or bingo or anything like that. We needed something that was going to keep us moving and thinking. And I've always had a long-term interest in permaculture and things like that, just through reading and pathetic little garden efforts in the backyard. So that's how we ended up here.
So there's some very exciting things happening on this farm. Tell us a little about all your...
Okay. We've got a few things happening at the moment. We've moved up here about 3 years ago, I think now, and we bought it walk in, walk out from an elderly couple who'd been here for about 11 years, and so everything came with it, including the cows. And that was an interesting exercise in itself, but in any case, we've still got some of them, and we're slowly sort of trying to breed ourselves reasonable cattle. That's an ongoing process, and we're not there yet. So we've got some cattle happening. And then we decided we might have a crack at ginger. And that seemed pretty easy. And there's a lot of ginger around the place. And as it transpired, we weren't able to get seed because we decided to do it when every other man and his dog decided to do it, and ginger prices were super high. Could not buy seed to save yourself. So we went tissue culture, which is we'd never heard of, but basically it's cloning plants. That's actually very good for ginger because it will allow you to get seed material that is pretty much disease-free, which, there's disease problems associated with ginger, particularly in this region. And if you're using seed that's come out of the paddock, you can't be assured you're getting disease-free seed.
So tell us a little bit more about the culture and that whole process, because I know it was really interesting process.
Look, it was a terribly interesting process, quite terrifying, because none of this is cheap. So firstly, my husband and his mate had to build these greenhouses that are behind us. And then on a day in whenever it was, late last year, we took receipt of a truckload of 5,000 little wee plants in tiny little tubes, probably a quarter the size of a forestry tube that you'd be familiar with. Little wee plants about this high. And they'd been in a terribly controlled greenhouse. They'd been, after the culturing, they'd been grown out for probably 8 to 10 weeks by nursery people who actually knew what they were doing, into the little plants that we then put into grow bags in the greenhouse here. Now, the thing with that is you don't get, when you grow them out in the grow bags, you don't then take it to the shop. That's year one. That gives you your seed material. So we had to grow these out for pretty much a year, giving them the nutrition that we needed to through the irrigation system, doing all of the stuff that you need to do to keep plants alive. And then in, what month are we in now? December, goodness, yeah. In September, we started putting them out in the paddock. And, we had to obviously pull the plants out, rinse them off. And because it's tissue culture ginger, it does not look like the stuff you get at the supermarket, the nice big fat hands of ginger. It's weird little bobbles of ginger that sort of break apart in your hands fairly readily, and you look at it thinking, is that going to be okay? But apparently it is. And so we've popped it into the ground now. We did that over about 3 weeks in September, October, and it's busy growing away to start coming out, we hope, from late April, March.
So what have the
May would be coming after April.
What have the challenges been with this?
Look, ignorance, learning on the job, and particularly when you've got a decent investment in something, well, it's a decent investment to us, you want to make sure you're right. So, ignorance and fear. There's been minor insect problems, but nothing too bad. There's one of the insects that is a problem for ginger and other crops around, well, increasingly throughout Australia, but from the north coming down is the fall armyworm. We've found a few here. Squish them when we find them. Because we're certified organic here, we can't just go and apply poison. So, there are some organic products we can use, but we haven't had a huge problem. So it's really just been a case of keeping on top of it, watching it. I do have another current solution for the crop down in the paddock, but I haven't put that into action yet. That'll be soon. I was adopting the permaculture principle that if you haven't got a slug problem, you've got a duck deficiency. So we got ourselves a dozen ducks, and they're just bobbling around down near the house at the moment because we haven't put them down in the paddock yet. We've got to get them some housing and water, and most importantly, secure electric fencing so that we can let them out of daytime to bobble around in the ginger now that it's of a size where they won't destroy it.
Right.
And my hope is that they'll also enjoy the fall armyworm if they find any. So that's one of our methods.
You were telling me that you just have drakes. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, we do just have drakes. Look, we got them from some friends. They indicated that they'd be nice and quiet together, and they are. They're all pretty calm and collected. Apparently when you get the boys and girls together, they can be a little bit more feisty. These guys are pretty cruisy. They just wander around the yard and
So for pest control, you can pretty much just have drakes.
Well, apparently, yeah. I mean, the proof will be in the pudding when I get them down there to see if they actually do it. But otherwise, we've got a rather expensive set of duck dinners coming up.
Tell me a little bit about your organic certification, because this property wasn't organic when you came here.
No, it wasn't. And look, I think it's fair to say that it was the opposite of organic before we came here, because when we walked in and walked out, we walked into a shed full of things with skulls and crossbones all over them. Poisons. There was lots of stuff here. We've packed it all up and sent it off to some friends who are still farming conventionally, and that's fine. So it wasn't actually that much of a process, because honestly, the people we bought from, I think, had been probably not able to do too much in the last couple of years they were here due to ill health. And then we weren't able to do much in the first 3 years we were here due to being too damn busy. So the land lay fallow, which was great. I can recall when we came here, even though it wasn't particularly drought-stricken, there'd been some rain, but you'd do your shovel in, and the soil was just, there was no apparent life in it. We've got worms coming up now. This is with having done pretty much nothing, just ignoring it. We've got worms coming up on every shovelful that we dig out in the paddock. That's great. And in the cultivation too, which is, I would have thought, a bit amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So people often say that organic certification is a very onerous process. What is your experience?
No, look, I will say I have had experience with 2 different certifying organisations now. The ones we used up here, Southern Cross, were great, absolutely great. There's rules and they want you to follow them, and that's fine, but there was a distinct difference between these guys and the people that we'd used last time who... let's not even go there. Short story, not incredibly onerous, but I mean, you've got to be prepared to keep records. Luckily for me, I'm a spreadsheet nerd and I love a good record. So I have no trouble in, keeping track of all the things we've got to do, because clearly you have to record all your inputs, and, there's a lot of... they need to know you're really doing what you say you're doing. So you need to be able to demonstrate that. So that's a no-brainer for me. It's easy. I'm a lawyer. I take notes. It's easy.
Any other sort of income streams you've got on the property, or?
Well, I mean, the ginger will be, I hope, a reasonable one for this next few months. But as you'd appreciate, that's only, comes up once a year. Although you can a lot of people don't just dig it all up at once. You can dig it up over a few months because there's a difference in the ginger that is pulled up in April to the stuff that's pulled up in September. You can pull it up later in the year. The new stuff is very pink, slightly pink tinge to the skin. Usually that's the stuff that gets used in confectionery.
Right.
Like that fantastic crystallised ginger you can buy in the supermarket. That's the young stuff. The stuff you get in the supermarket, look, I picked up a piece at a big store the other day at $50 a kilo, and it was like old rope. Tasted great, but it gets coarser,
fibrous
and more fibrous as the months go on. So great for cooking, not so good for crystallised ginger. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I never realised that. So you could sort of be pacing yourself with regard to your income if that's...
Yeah. Well, and with regard to your back as well, if you haven't got a labour force of young backpackers who want to get in there and dig it all up, because I don't want to be digging that all up on my own in 3 weeks.
Okay, so that is something that's important to understand. There's a bit of labour involved in getting it into the ground, and obviously then when you harvest. Yeah,
look, that's right. I mean, it's intensive labour to put it in and pull it up. Moderate for weeding and whatnot, because, I mean, we're weeding at the moment because it's not quite big enough. But once ginger gets a go on, it doesn't really... It doesn't have much competition. It'll outcompete most of the stuff. I do know one of your other podcast subjects, Kane Boos, he's got a cash crop of ginger, and he's got stuff planted in his rows between hand.
Yep.
I saw that podcast and took a lot of heart from that. I'm actually thinking about taking up some of what he's doing for next year, because that looks a heck of a lot easier. I don't want to be weeding when I don't have to be weeding.
Yes.
And I'd love to be, whippersnippering down the centre aisle so you can walk through them rather than trying to gouge stuff up.
Right.
And also it's keeping cover on the soil, which is terribly important.
So you're referring to his agroforestry sort of approach?
Yeah, that's right. He's got the ginger intercropped with, he's got some trees and other plants to give cover, and I've actually started a couple of rows of those because when we cultivated, we didn't have an idea of how far the crop was going to go, so we ended up with a couple extra rows. So I put some trees either side, and I intend for next year to adopt his approach and probably put one down the middle as well, so that we've got plenty of cover and more closely replicate ginger's natural environment, which is it's a rainforesty sort of plant.
Exactly. So, understory.
It's an understory plant. So let's try and create that artificially.
And that's interesting, because what you're now referring to is this going to a more biodiverse system than just this monocropping that we often see with regard to ginger. Well,
yeah, I think there's great value in doing it with many crops. I mean, not that I've tried yet, but the theory looks eminently more sensible to me than having vast, broadacre. And there goes the dog.
We've got a hare running around in the paddock, and Jack's running around after, so no problem. A bit of light entertainment for us while we're doing our podcast.
Yes, let's just hope he doesn't bring anything back to show us. That would not be cool. Cut.
So getting back to your sort of, other income streams, because it appears to me that farmers need to have a diverse amount of income streams.
Yeah, well, look, I've also got a business I brought up here. I have a little quail egg operation that's quite small. It's really only a cottage industry. It was actually pretty much donated, not to me, but we had a community farm in our front paddock at the property at Logan. There was a whole heap of Karenni migrants who wanted somewhere to grow veggies, so they did that. We got on ABC TV on a brief spot, and then a man who clearly had a good deal of common sense promptly donated his quail egg business to these people because he'd had enough of it. And then when things went as they do, and the volunteers became a little erratic, I took it over, employing one of the chaps there so that he had a full-time job.
Okay.
And when we came up here, I was faced with either, dispatching a whole heap of birds, or just bringing them up and giving myself something to do until we got organised on the farm. So that's what I did.
Okay, fabulous. So you did touch on the community farm, which leads me a little bit to volunteering, because it would appear to me that volunteering seems to be in your DNA. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's probably a fair assessment. Look, it's come from my family, I guess. I do remember it from a very early days. I was at a very small school, 9 kids in the school. 3 of them were Slingsbys. And so the school fete, where you had to turn up and, bring cakes and stuff you'd made, my parents would turn up with a station wagon full of because they had to produce a third of the stuff for the stalls. So from there, yeah, I've just always done stuff. I think I probably started in my early 20s as a, what do you call it, brown owl or whatever, the brownies.
Right.
And moved on. I've been involved with Zonta. I've been a president of a Zonta club and community banking organisation, women's domestic violence organisation, Landcare, QWaLC. There's some others in there, but they're the sort of longer term ones. So.
Why do you do it though?
Well, I know everybody says we've got to give back. Well, yeah, you do got to give back. I actually think there's a social contract. And I think that we're living in a fantastic place. Most of us are doing okay. And even if you're not doing okay, you're doing better than somebody else. So I think it's part of the social contract to do something for other people, because it does literally make you feel good. I think it probably does more for you than it does for the people you're endeavouring to assist.
Right. So you touched on Landcare. Tell us a little bit about Gympie Landcare and what's happening there and maybe their vision.
Well, look, I will tell you honestly, I got roped in. I completely got roped into Landcare. I moved up here and I knew one of the board members. She'd lived on Tamarind Mountain, and she said, Maree, we need people on the board. Okay. And like about 10 minutes later, I found I was the president. Oh, okay, radio. So, good. And at that point, I realised Gympie Landcare was in the process of pretty much renovating itself. And in doing so, it apart from doing all of the obvious stuff of renovating all the processes and procedures and policies and all of those important things you've got to do if you're trying to professionalise yourselves, it was also looking to go as a back to the future. And the more I learnt about it, I realised that Landcare in Gympie had been formed as much as the broader organisation had by a group of farmers who were wanting to do better on the land and to improve things. And the current focus of the organisation is to not to ignore what we're doing at the moment in other spheres, but to revisit and expand upon that original aim, because that's something that hasn't been happening in the recent past. We've been more looking at revegetation for and on behalf of councils and other large organisations, and weed control in Maree Valley catchment areas, Maree River catchment areas, all very worthy things. But it occurred to us that the land managers who have the most ability to have the most impact are the farmers. And it's pretty clear that there's a bit of a move on, that more people now are considering their stewardship of the land in a more considered way. And, well, no, that's not quite right. I think they've always been considered, but I think now the penny is starting to drop, that some of the things that we chucked out 50 or 60 years ago, acting on what seemed like great advice at the time, that we had to get bigger, that we had to have more monocropping, the penny's starting to drop, that actually that wasn't working too well, because in a fairly short order of time we've done some pretty silly things to our land. So, I mean, I'm not trying to disparage farmers who farm conventionally, because I know that everybody who farms wants their land to do well, and everybody takes advice unless they're really, really arrogant. Everybody listens and tries to work out the best way to do it. But I think more people are starting to realise that there are ways to do it that don't involve high inputs, that don't involve high stress, that do still involve profitability, and they're not necessarily the ones that come in, bottles you get at the produce store.
So, I mean, you make a very good point, because there's obviously what would appear to be a myth that says that regenerative farming principles or practices cost more, your crops, you don't get as much yield from your crops. I mean, is this starting to be dispelled as a notion, or?
Look, I think it is. I mean, there's no one size fits all. And I think it's absolutely clear that you cannot. Everything I've listened to, read, and what I see tells me you can't just go one day from, merrily spraying glyphosate everywhere as a knockdown and then you suddenly say, hallelujah, I'm saved. I'm not going to do anything bad anymore. I'm not going to, I'm going to be completely free of chemicals. That's mad. You can't do it because your soil, your crops, your plants have become used to a certain level of assistance for whatever it is, whether it's fertiliser or weedicides, and you just can't. You can't just knock it off. But you can start to make small incremental changes over time that will impact your bottom line positively, and that will start to get you out of that constant paradigm of having to increase your outputs to increase your inputs to increase your outputs.
So it would appear there seems to be a tipping point sort of happening in the regenerative space. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I hope that's not just our fanciful imagination, because we're optimists. It feels like it. Probably less people look at you like you're crazy when you talk about things like this now than used to. I mean, I would say I haven't been talking about it with farmers at any length for a long period of time, for many, many years. But I don't know, I actually think that with farmers' innate sense and knowledge, somewhere back there they always knew that there's a better way than the chemical way. I mean, I'll give you a brief example. My dad, an old dairy farmer and small crop farmer, although he followed the advice he was given from whatever they were called then, the Department of Primary Industries or whoever, and the crops in the field got all of the stuff that they were told to put on or recommended to put on. Our home garden, it was chook poo, it was companion planting, it was all of those things. He knew how to grow stuff, but somewhere it got, the innate knowledge just sort of got, oh, well, these guys must know. This is the expert opinion.
So when it came to his family, he had a different sort of approach to his cropping, which is it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've heard that story more than once. So, Maree, here we are in December 2021. It's the most unprecedented time in history. I mean, we used to say change is with us, but what's happening at the moment is just so unpredictable. So, as individuals, I think a lot of us might be feeling anxious. What do you think we can do as individuals in this time?
Well, I guess there's various things that are impacting us. I mean, it seems like everything's impacting us. Disease, changing climate for whatever reason. I think that what we need to do is stop waiting for somebody else to fix the problem. We can complain about the government not doing this, that, or the next thing, but at the end of the day, the question is, what are you doing? What is it what steps are you taking to reduce your footprint on the earth and make sure it's as light as it can? If you're buying a T-shirt every week, but, doing all your Facebook warrior stuff about eco issues. Well, shut up. Just actually do something that's going to make a difference. Don't just talk about it. I don't think we need to wait. We can't wait for governments to catch up with what needs to happen in a variety of spheres. We just need to take sensible steps to do what we need to do. And really, we can't control the wider world. We can control our own sphere of influence. That's all you can control. But if everybody controlled their sphere of influence in a positive way, there wouldn't be an issue.
Absolutely. It's almost as if we've been born for a time like this, to really just say, well, I'm stepping up now. I'm not waiting for anybody else to do it.
Yeah. I think that's what we need to do. And I'm not suggesting we march in the streets. I just go about your business and do the things that you know are sensible.
So, I think we're sort of starting to wrap up our conversation. Some words of wisdom from Maree?
Oh, dear. Yeah, when you sent me those, a bit of a preview of the questions, I went, I'll have to work that one out on the spot. Because I'm not feeling terribly wise this afternoon. Look, I just think that if everybody does their best to be a bit kinder, to be a bit cleaner, to be a bit more mindful about the resources they're using, that's all it takes to make an enormous change.
Right. So, Maree, thank you. This was a very insightful conversation, particularly around ginger. I don't know how many people really understand what happens with ginger. Is there anything else you want to leave us with at this point?
Oh, I think we've covered a fair spectrum, including the philosophy of life. So that's not a bad place to leave it.
Well, thank you very much for your time. And we hope this farm, and we know this farm is going to go from strength to strength. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel.
Thank you for listening to Gympie Landcare's podcast. Please jump onto our website, www.gympielandcare.org.au. There you will find many services that can help you restore your land. We have a nursery, biological services, and a team that can visit your property and assess your needs with regard to conservation. Please like, share, or comment and subscribe. We would love to hear from you.